It's Mike. I put the computer on on a chair so it's less wobbly. I realise that this is a really unflattering angle, but I actually look like this to most of you, so very realistic. But anyway, thanks for coming, guys. So today I want to talk about self-compassion. Um, I think it's really important to understand it and also to understand what it's not. Um, Most of us have had events in our life that have been extremely overwhelming. And the reason for the overwhelm is because it's complicated. There's lots of complications in life. Life is super complicated. Relationships, friendships, family dynamics are super complicated. Um, and so when we have a lot of things going on, be it a relationship issue, which seems to be my uh, Achilles heel, or family relationships, I do great there actually, or work situations. If we've got a lot of those, two or more of those things, all going crazy, we get really, really overwhelmed because it's all super, super complicated. And to make matters worse is that our nervous system, our vata in Indian medicine, gets super, super triggered and kind of energetically inflamed. And so we feel like we can't see a way out. The light at the end of the tunnel seems to be going way out ahead in front of us. And the only remedy that I've been able to find in all of this is self compassion. Now, self compassion is not feeling sorry for yourself, okay? It's never been about that. Self compassion is about acknowledging that there's just a small part of you, usually emotionally, that we're struggling with. So many of you have been my students and you've known me for a while, and we've talked about how we have a life situation that we can intellectually get our brain around. Like, we actually understand the mechanics. We might be able to understand the other person's point of view if there's a relationship issue or family issue. But for some reason, our biology is telling us this different story. And so that dichotomy, that difference, that juxtaposition between full mental understanding and emotional chaos can get really, really overwhelming. So, self compassion, what it is acknowledging, as I said, that there's just a small part of you that is struggling. So, what I like to do as an analogy is see that part that's struggling as my inner child. So, I take my inner child wherever I go, and me, the adult, the intellect, that's emotionally intelligent, will be able to process and help that vulnerable part of myself to understand what might be going on in any given moment. But sometimes things can be so overwhelming that he freaks out, little guy. So the first thing you do in self compassion is acknowledge that he, that little inner child or her, is struggling. And the way you do that is you can start peripherally and say, the little child inside of me is freaking out even though I know better, and that's okay. Or if you want to go in and make it more personal, you can say, I'm really struggling right now. Some people find that I'm really struggling right now really intense and too inwards. So you might start with, as another client told me, that there is a person, me, among people, us, that is really struggling to understand what's going on in his relationship right now. So it's like an inflatable pool filled with emotions, water, and we're just pushing down the edge of it a little to let a bit of water out. So we start peripherally, if it gets too intense, and then we can slowly make our way in. I'll give you an example of this. So yeah, so we could acknowledge that there's a part of me, or there's a little child inside that's really struggling right now. And you might like to talk to that little child and say, okay, well, we don't need to understand what's going on. All we need to know is that we don't feel like ourselves, or we feel really stressed or anxious or emotional. And you could say something to your inner child like you would your niece, nephew, or own child, real life child, that you really wish you could take it away from them. And I really wish I could take that away from you. I'm sorry to hear that you're going through that. And you give yourself words of encouragement. Now, I remember years ago, I was in a relationship with someone that was perfectly fine, really nice person actually, but something didn't feel right, and I kept suppressing this feeling because on paper, this person made perfect sense. They ticked all the boxes. They would have been a perfect complement to my life, but for something felt completely wrong. And of course, when you ignore the inner child warning you or being fearful, justified or not, I started to get really stressed, really confused. I had far too many freakouts. And then eventually, I remember running on the beach at Narrabeen to exhaustion, literally running from my feelings, from my inner child that kept on tugging on the back of my shirt saying, I'm freaking out. And as soon as I acknowledged that I was freaking out, I had a huge cry. It wasn't self-pity. It was just, I couldn't run anymore. And I started to nurture myself and talk to myself and soothe myself. And I felt a billion times better after I did that. As I said, it wasn't self-pity. I didn't need to know the answers in that moment. All I needed to do, and what I was running from, was acknowledging how I actually felt, which was unsure. I was confused and insecure. Now, after that emotion washed over me and kind of softened and waned, I realized that indeed there was nothing wrong with this person that I was dating, but there definitely was something that I needed to work on my own. And I decided to end that relationship, which was really devastating. And they moved on, and everyone worked out. It worked out really, really well. So that's an example of how self-compassion can soothe. I had a work situation, and it's extremely rare for me. My working life is actually exceptionally good. I've got some amazing people around, but it hasn't always been that way. I remember I was dealing with someone that was working for me that was being very covert and dishonest and two-faced, and I was feeling really confused and in sort of denial of what my senses were telling me. My inner child was pulling me on the back of the shirt saying, Mike, you've got to be really careful. They're not who they say they are. And sure enough, I acknowledged to myself that I was confused, that I was really struggling with this situation. And what actually happened was this wave of relief came over me because, again, I wasn't running. And then I started by just acknowledging how I felt, how to get ahead of the situation and getting ahead of what was actually happening and what this person was up to. And then I could see clearly. So self-compassion is actually a really effective tool to get ahead of your problems so that you lead yourself into the solution, as opposed to being dragged through the swamp with all your unacknowledged feelings until you sink like quicksand. So think of it as a strategy to get ahead of your problems and to be able to create a life and surround yourself with people that complement what you're creating. So yeah, self-compassion. I do a just in case self-compassion when I'm tired, just to see if there's any hidden feelings or doubts that I might have. So I'm going to leave a link on this video to self-compassion.org. there's some free exercises by Kristen Neff, and she has a beautiful, creamy, smooth, motherly voice. I've never met her, but I've been sending these links to my clients for years. So, what I would suggest you do is do a self compassion break where you're feeling your way with your breath into your body and seeing if there's any unresolved emotions that may need to be released. And it's a really fantastic practice. So I do a just in case self compassion break, even if things are rolling out beautifully, just to check that I'm okay, that I'm on track, I'm not bearing anything. It's like asking your own 3-year-old child, "How you traveling, kiddo? What's going on, squirt?" And let them have their say. And it could be an emotion, it could be a giggle. Self compassion is a really beautiful thing. And I have friends that have zero problem at all in acknowledging that they're struggling. It might tip in the other direction where they might keep self perpetuating it. That's another little risk there. But when you do self compassion breaks that are genuine, there's no risk of going under with the emotion because you're letting it express itself. It's the equivalent of holding a beach ball down underwater. Yoga, super cool, super great. The actual practice of getting on the mat, especially yin yoga, because what you're saying is, I need to check out in the world. I need to check in with my body. We breathe into our body. We breathe into our joints because there's very little blood supply, and so it's a great hideout for your issues in the connective tissue. So we deal with that in yin yoga. Guys, you can do yoga for free on our yoga channel on YouTube, Yoga Lover, luba.com. And yeah, so leave your comments, guys. I'm going to time this better so that people can ask me questions while I'm shooting this video. So if during the week you have any questions or you want me to talk about something, because I've realized I've got this humongous amount of knowledge that I just keep 95% of it to myself, and some may leak out in my yoga classes. So okay guys, I love you. I really like these sessions. They make me feel. All right, see you guys.